Hi, this is Ryan Bloom. On today's episode of the Fireside Chat, we're going to be talking with progressive and basically awesome landscape architect Melissa Gerstle, based in Dallas, Texas. We're going to talk about how she is evolving the use of outdoor space to meet with her clients' growing needs, both as it relates to COVID, as the backyard becomes the vacation spot, but also to really help personalize and identify spaces that resonate with her clients' wants, needs, and desired outcomes. We're going to talk to her about the Kips Bay Show House project, where her and over 24 other Dallas-based designers have come together to create the show house that beautifully reflects design in Dallas. We're going to talk about her experience. We're going to talk about COVID, and it's a really amazing episode. I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been excited to meet you and speak with you. I've been following your work, and I have so many things I want to ask you about. But before I do, if I can, obviously with everything going on in the U.S. and in the world with COVID, and I was doing some research, and I know that Texas, along with California and Florida, have been three of the hardest hit states, if you will, and just wanted to ask how you, your family, your community are. Just how's everything where you are in Dallas?
Oh, well, first, thank you for having me. I've been so excited to be a part of this and to talk with you. So I've been looking forward to it as well, and I appreciate you having me. And thank you for asking that very kind question. Fortunately, we're doing well over here. Texas has been a hot state for a while now, and the numbers have been going up and down, and now they seem to be on a sort of an upward trend again, which I think a lot of people feared with the start of schools and things opening up, and after Labor Day weekend, which is now several weeks ago, more than a few weeks. But fortunately, my family is doing well. We are staying safe. Our kids are actually in school right now, and they wear masks, and they have great procedures to keep the kids safe, but still able to interact. And I have family in two different states, also hot states, New York, which seemed to be better, but now I think has an uptick, and Florida. So everyone is a little bit uptight right now, and we haven't seen each other in a long time. So that's kind of tough. But I think everyone's really struggling with that right now. How are you guys doing over there in Canada and Montreal?
You know, Quebec as a province has had the highest number of cases out of all the provinces in Canada. And there's a whole bunch of factors, I think, that contribute to that. Our cases have certainly gone up over the last couple of weeks, and the government put sort of some new restrictions in. So, for example, restaurants are completely closed if not for takeout or delivery. My wife is a yoga studio owner and teacher. Her studios are effectively closed to anything more than a one-on-one class. So they've definitely put more restrictions in. And I think exactly as you experienced, the back to school really was a huge impact. You know, my son goes to a school, and there were 4 cases in his particular grade, 4 kids who got together, weren't supposed to, and were sharing some kind of a vape thing, and that's all it takes to spread it, right? Yep. And they had to shut down his grade for 2 weeks, so he just spent the last 2 weeks virtual. Mm-hmm. But I think this is just going to be the reality for a little bit more until we have rapid testing and that's sort of at scale and readily available. So.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we're close to getting that. I've been following this amazing new technologies that are almost ready for approval, that you would blow into something that looks like a whistle, like on a keychain, and a single use, and it would be able to tell you, like almost like a pregnancy test, within 3 minutes you're positive, negative.
That's so amazing. That would
these things are not far from being ready at scale from what I'm reading.
That's terrific. That beats the temperature test, I think. I mean, which is not really an indicator. So
right, you are.
They say. So yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that you and your family are well. And now, if I can, I've just been really excited to talk to you. There's a few things I want to ask you about today. First, I spent a lot of time on your website and on your Instagram, And I wanted to ask, and this is something that I always find interesting about designers, is often some sort of just share pretty pictures and share finished work.
Mm-hmm.
And others, and the ones that I find frankly more interesting and more enjoyable to follow, share the journey and show inspiration beyond just projects. And I looked at your feed, and beyond just magnificent projects and gardens and vertical, beautiful greenery, you also show black and whites of amazing women. I think you have one of Marilyn Monroe. I think you have one of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on your feed. I just, it seems like you've mixed in a lot of inspiration, and I would just love to hear about that.
So I try to keep the feed a little bit interesting on that sense. And I with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that was a very a recent thing with her passing. I really try to share things that I'm inspired by with the community that follows me. And I think people get tired also of seeing the same thing over and over again. So and as do I. And so that's part of why I do that. But I'm also thinking more about the things that inspire me, not just as a designer, but as a human and as a person and a woman. And so those are the things like with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and other elements that I try to bring in there to show people what drives me. And that really drives also the way I design, because when I work with people for design, I really think about and try to have in-depth conversations about what it is that the client is looking for, what are the things that inspire them, how can we turn those things into something that's tangible in their view and in their garden. I think it's really important for people to feel inspired, to wake up inspired, to look out their windows and see things that make them want to attack the day. And that's really my mission with design, and with creating gardens and outdoor spaces. It's to inspire people and give people the motivation and the fortitude to move forward, which right now, especially, I think is such an important thing. Everybody is looking to feel better, with whether it be about all the things that are going on in the world, from climate change to the political situation to, of course, COVID right now. We're spending more time at home. But even prior to that, I've always looked to try to find ways to help and inspire my clients.
And what, beyond education, before you could start inspiring clients, you had to be inspired yourself, I imagine. And can you tell me just a little bit about your story or your journey? What kind of led you, whether it's from childhood, adolescence, in your early years, what led you into the area of specialty that you're now in, which is, I think for a long time was kind of a rarity in sort of the idea of outdoor space activation. It's still, even though it's been going on for a long time, it's a lot more prevalent in design and discussion than it would have been 10 years ago, for example. What led you into this field?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think I took a typical path. I think that a lot of people say, oh, well, when I was a kid, I was always digging in the garden and I was planting things with my parents. And I wish I had, I did do a little bit of that. My dad would always have a vegetable garden and things like that. But my parents weren't huge gardeners. I really didn't discover my love of nature, I think, until I was in college, actually. I started out studying in the school. Well, actually, my original goal was to become a photojournalist for National Geographic. So I was interested in nature. I knew that, and I loved to write and I loved to communicate. And so that was my path. I had this vision. But I think what I realized when I was in school, I studied in the School of Natural Resources at the University of Michigan. That's where I started out. And I quickly realized that while that was a vision of something that I thought was really cool, I had really romanticized what that was. So when I saw or imagined myself as Jane Goodall in the forest alone, or Diane Fossey with, gorillas, I realized that I would have been extremely lonely and frightened, and it was not the life for me. And so instead, I realized I needed to connect with nature in a different way. And when I started taking some plant ID classes classes there, which primarily focused on trees. That's when I really realized, oh, wow, I really love plant identification and I love the differences between plants. And then I learned about landscape architecture. And then that's when the light went off. And I said, okay, this is something I really, really want to do. And then from there, even though I learned about that field, I ended up taking a different path. They didn't have an undergraduate degree. So instead, I ended up getting a business degree and I transferred to the business school at Michigan and worked in marketing for several years. And then after that, I still had this calling and I knew that I wanted to go back to that. And that's when I went back to grad school to study landscape architecture. So it kind of took a different path than probably the norm, but that's how that happened. Yeah.
It's amazing how, to your point about sort of attaching to the life cycle of plants and how things grow and understanding them, you just made me think about something that I haven't thought about in a long time. And it's sort of relevant to what you're saying in terms of an overall experience. When I was, let me just think for a second, I was 17, turning 18, I took a year and went to actually live on a kibbutz in Israel.
Oh, wow.
On a school exchange program. Woke up every morning at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I got put into, some of my friends were in the chickens and the kitchen and the oranges, and I, for some reason, got put into the banana fields.
Uh-huh.
And I learned in that time, which is super interesting, how, I learned the bananas are not a tree, they're actually a grass. And that in 1 year, just slightly less than a year, a plant that was 7 or 8 inches high would grow into this 15 or 16 foot monstrosity and deliver a 80-pound bunch of bananas in a 1 year period, which is an incredible, and then that tree is dead or that grass is, and that's finished. And it was you just made me think about the context of how greenery and trees and flowers, they really represent life cycle in an incredible way in different contexts of where they are.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. I love to see how plants evolve over time. And that's the most interesting thing about working as a designer, as a landscape designer. It's because the playing field is always changing. So a lot of times I envy interior designers because I always feel like you can set your furniture down and hang your pictures on the walls, and then you can walk away and you can come back a year later and it's all the same, and you don't have to worry about the sofa dying or or the picture on the wall growing too large. So with gardens, it's constantly evolving. The plants we plant are growing. Things, they're changing over time, and sometimes they do what we want and a lot of times they don't. Trees will create more shade, and so sun gardens may have to turn into shade gardens. And so you're constantly having to think about how things are going to evolve over time, what kind of changes are going to need to be made, and planning for that and communicating with clients. But the cool thing about it is that there's this ongoing conversation. And so there's a constant back and forth with clients. I love when I can see a garden evolve over time and how we've changed and done things differently to make things better and better. So it's a really neat process. But yeah, plants are a great symbolic thing for life and for the cycles that we go through.
They are amazing. I want to lead that a little bit into something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, which is how you and your clients will align on vision and how that's such an important part of that process and the relationship that's established, because the client designer relationship has such an aspect of trust that is required in it. And I ask this question all the time to anyone that I'm speaking to in the design space. And I'd like to ask you the same sort of thing. I think today consumers have far more access to inspiration on design than they would have 5, 10, 15 years ago, where they can now, with a click of a button, go to House or Pinterest or Instagram and be able to articulate visually what they like or what they don't like. And the question I ask the designers is that access that people now have to inspiration, is that an asset is that in some ways a hindrance to the design community who would like to be able to present that vision board as a first step? What do you see as the role or relationship in your world that technology is doing in terms of prepping the consumer for the realm of possible?
I think it's a great thing. I really do. I think it's really helpful for clients to be able to put together their own mood board and say, hey, this is the vision I have. These are the things that I love. It creates a lot of clarity. My job then is to distill that down into something that will work within the realm of their space and to make sure that it applies visually and that the everything aligns and is synced up in a way that it doesn't look strange or out of place. And it also is a great way for me to know if I'm a good connection, if it's a good connection or a good fit for a client to work with me. So, for example, you know, if a client is living in some Italianate house and they want to put in, you know, an English garden, that may not be the best example, but something that's really out of place or some super modern type of element that would look really weird in there. That's a conversation I can have with the client and say, well, you know, this might look a little bit out of place, and let's think about how we can interpret this and make it work the right way. And that's something that's personally important to me. I feel like a sense of place, which we learn very early on in landscape architecture, the Latin term genius loci, some people say loci, but is, you know, the making things fit where they need to be, letting the site really rule the design. And that's a job for designers to take the space, the landscape, and the architecture and pull it all together and make it work. But then taking that client's vision from I'm sorry, they're just turned the fountains on over here. I hope you can hear me okay.
I hear you great. No problem.
Okay. So, you know, taking that all and making it work together is really important. But you asked also about the technology. So taking those pictures, those mood boards from the client and understanding what they want brings so much more clarity, I think, to a project than just kind of throwing some ideas up in the air. The other end of the technology that's so fabulous is right now I'm able to produce 3D models for all of my clients. So we even did it for this garden that I'm sitting in beforehand, and it is incredible when you look at the 3D animation of this garden that we produced and then the actual images of the garden. It is almost identical. So we're able to really use technology to show people what we are planning to produce, and they get a great understanding of it, and it really cuts down on misunderstandings and miscommunications a lot.
It's funny you say that. I would, you know, one of the things that we do for clients is when we do designs, they're not 2D. We actually have an in-house team and we do 3D renderings to scale, to color, to countertop chosen, to grill brand chosen, where the renderings are literally almost true to life.
Yeah.
And I believe just doing that has had a fundamental shift in our business because it allows the consumer designer to see it in context.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a huge piece of communicating or articulating with the client.
It is. For sure. I'm sure it definitely helps with sales numbers as well. And I see that on my side, like the excitement that comes forth from, you know, seeing something that looks so real, that seeing that vision, it just creates an excitement and a momentum to keep a project moving, which is just unprecedented, I think. So
totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The frightening part about it though is when people see the HGTV type things or the television things where everything happens like this. And so that's the place that we have to sort of unravel, or when it shows up on a screen and people think, oh, well, then we can have it tomorrow. And it doesn't quite happen that fast. So that's sort of managing expectations. And that's kind of where one of the downsides of those things. But I don't think that's a downside of technology. That's more about setting proper expectations and letting people know that things, even though the TV segment slapped it all together, that was probably a month or more time,
or more.
Many more months.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you've obviously been in the growing and evolving space of outdoor space activation, landscape, garden design, plants. Have you seen a significant shift or change in what today's client is looking for in outdoor space, that the level of seriousness, thoughtfulness, the meaningful aspects of spaces change and evolve as you said earlier, whether it's a result of market trend, a bit of fuel on the fire from COVID with people now not traveling, not making spends on large weddings, sweet 16s, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And those dollars being deployed back into still, even in very wealthy, beautifully designed homes, the outdoor space is typically behind indoor. It's not usually done in many cases at the same time. And it's the great area where people can make investments now in their homes. Are you seeing a change in what people are looking for, asking for, level the outdoors as a priority on their checklist of a home? I'd love to hear about that from you.
I am. I think that trend has been going through interiors as well, but yes, I'm definitely seeing it on the exterior side, where clients want a seamless transition between interior and exterior, which is what I always try to bring to the table. But also with people spending more time at home, they're much more thoughtful about what they want and what home means to them. They're seeing their homes more as their place for a respite. People aren't spending as much or able to go on vacations as much with COVID. And so, the backyard is now the vacation spot. And I don't mean that to say we turn it into these wild resorts and like an amusement park. It's creating spaces that can create internal joy and respite and refreshment for people to feel fulfilled and inspired in their lives. And so they think about how they're going to use the space more. We have discussions about it. And with all the spaces, I really try to create places where people can connect and can have conversations and meaningful moments, and also have places to reflect. I think that's really important for people. But again, beyond those elements, there's a lot more focus on things like outdoor usage and entertainment, outdoor kitchens and more elaborate type things, guest quarters and outdoor extra office spaces, such as like a cabana type building might now be more of interest to create sort of a living quarter, work quarter for guests, especially with COVID, people thinking about, well, if I have a guest, I may not want them to stay in my home, or they may not want to be in my home. We can still social distance this way. So those are things I think people are thinking about. And it is becoming a priority. I'm seeing more thoughtfulness about the way the property as a whole works, and more personalization as well, as like, it's not as much about resale value as much as it is about what I want and what I need for my home to function for our family. And that's a different perspective on things now, a different way of thinking about the investment people are making in their homes.
I wholeheartedly and completely agree. And you just, again, it's so funny that you're saying these things and it's bringing up these kind of personal thoughts and memories. And I'm thinking about that the outdoor space can absolutely reflect, and you use it well, that sort of idea of the backyard. And that could also be a deck, a rooftop, it's any kind of outdoor space,
right,
representing the vacation spot. Mm-hmm. And I acknowledge in that there are people who see, dancing, going to foam parties, huge, watching football games outside
Right.
in a Club Med like environment
Uh-huh.
as their definition of a vacation. That's what they want. You want to do jacuzzis with laser light shows and TVs that come out of the, you can
Yeah.
accomplish that.
Right.
Whereas myself, my wife and my family, we've been going to a small village in Costa Rica called Nosara for the last 10 years. It's where my wife and I got married. And we stay at
Yeah.
this little tiny hotel called the Harmony, which has some of the most beautiful vegetation, trees. I mean, the care that goes into it is remarkable.
Hmm.
And a very, very dear friend of mine, who's actually an award-winning landscape architect here in Montreal, his name is Stuart Webster. And
Hmm.
his office is a few minutes from us, and we've collaborated on a bunch of projects. But more than that, he's a really dear friend of mine. And he happened to be at this Harmony Hotel at exactly the same time as my family
Oh, well.
in early March. And to watch him look at the way the trees were designed, plant, lows, highs, it really put it in context of someone who, you know, if I was recreating my outdoor space, I would want that. I would
Right.
want that more. So
Yeah.
to your point, and I apologize if I'm long-winded, but to your point, the outdoors can absolutely mirror the behavior and the desired effect of the user. And
That's
that's
right.
really nice.
That's absolutely true. Um, yeah, so it's all about the way you want to live and the way you want to use your home and use your space and allow it to support you and your family. Um, I think that the other aspect of it is because we're also stuck in our homes and feeling like a little bit claustrophobic, the yard becomes an extension of that. And so people are really thinking more about like, how can I extend my space and create more space for us to enjoy? So that's another thing. Whereas if the yard was once neglected in the past and it was just this sort of overlooked space outside, people are now thinking about, hey, we have this space. Let's make it work. Let's put the time and the energy into creating something special for us. And it really does, and I've said this for years, it changes the way you live. It really changes the way you use your home, and it changes the way people feel about their lives. When you look outside and you see a gorgeous view, it just invigorates you. It makes you feel ready and feel refreshed, and it helps your whole emotional well-being. And that's I think people are realizing that more. They're becoming more aware of that, and they're wanting that. So yeah.
I agree, and the way you described, that seamless interior exterior experience that you your goal is to accomplish and that clients are seeking. We see the same thing also as it relates to the way people behave. So obviously we are in the outdoor space activation realm as it relates to cooking and entertaining, the things that you mentioned as those spaces, and merging indoor and outdoor visually, aesthetically, functionality wise. It's really at the very sort of top of the food chain of what is growing the realm of possible. And still today, what's amazing is that so many consumers don't even know yet what is possible outdoors.
Right.
And technology is moving so quickly from shading to heating to lighting to technology on televisions and Bluetooth. I mean, it's daunting how fast it's going.
It is. It's amazing. And that's why also it's so important to work with specialists, I think. For example, I design outdoor spaces, of course, outdoor living spaces and gardens, but I have a lighting consultant that I work with. I just can't keep up with that technology. I can communicate the effects that I want in the landscape at night, the things that we'd like to highlight and how we want sort of a soft light on this or a shade of that, and how I want the shadows to fall. But in order to create that effect and to make that happen, you have to know the technology that's going to create it and what kind of light bulb and how much wattage. And there's so much to it. So I definitely rely on experts. Same thing with outdoor kitchens. we know all the pieces and parts that we want in there, but we don't necessarily know the latest and greatest of technologies and how to organize those things. And so then we rely on people like you and your company to do things like that and to help us elevate the design to the next level. And so that's super important.
Well, it's really fun when you say it's collaborative, and I think that's really it lets people do what they do best, and I think ultimately it really benefits the consumer who get that best of experience, which is awesome. And that leads me to something else I wanted to ask you about. Talk about an example or a precedent of designer collaboration. I've been doing a little bit of research on the Kips Bay project that I know you're involved in. That's happening right now, as far as I understand.
I'm in the Kips Bay garden right now.
So tell me about the project. I was on the website. It looks like there's more than a dozen different design professionals involved. How does that integrate? Tell me about this really cool initiative.
Yeah, so this was the really, really neat project. There were 27 designers selected to work on this house. It's over 12,000 square feet in size. And I was really honored to be selected to do the backyard design, which I'm sitting in right now. We were given approximately 10 weeks from the time we were told to the time that we had to complete the design and implement it in our spaces. Everybody working sort of independently, but together in that we were here on site, and there's a lot of, crossing of paths and trying to make crews fit, and a lot of chaos going on to get it all done. So was your question about the collaboration or the collaborative aspect of the project? Or
first of all, your role in the project and what your specific area was, how you think it turned out, and also as it relates to what you said earlier about collaboration with experts.
Right.
What's it like to collaborate with 27 designers, each with obviously their own vantage point, their own design aesthetic?
Yeah.
What's that like?
So for a show home, the collaborative effort has been really phenomenal with this group. We all kind of designed our own spaces, so you're working a little bit in a vacuum in that you do design your own space, but as your space sort of interacts with other spaces, it's really dependent on how much the other designers want to work with you to sort of make things work together. I was phenomenally fortunate in that I worked alongside two different designers. My space is the backyard space, which I'm sitting in right now. There's a covered veranda that leads out to the backyard, and then an interior porch with a screened-in porch that leads to the veranda. So both of those spaces look out onto mine and are loosely connected with mine. We worked together to pick out a new hardscape space, a hard surface for the flooring, because I wanted to replace the entire pool deck that was around the pool. And that space is shared with the covered veranda. And so the designer of that space and I collectively agreed on what stone we would use. And I worked on getting that installed. He's based in Houston. But amazingly, we didn't work on anything else together. We both designed our own spaces and furnished them. I planned the garden out using that stone in two separate spaces and furnished the space. However, the incredible part is when you look at the two spaces that are next to each other, they connect absolutely seamlessly. The color schemes we selected work together. We both use black and white and teak. And that is just, I don't know how much of that is coincidence or just being on trend this year with what the color schemes were. But it looks like we worked together, but we really didn't beyond the flooring. So, and that was the case inside the house as well. A lot. I see that there are a lot of overlaps in color selections, some completely different, but some really had a lot of overlaps. And I think that's just about designers being on trend and seeing what colors are working. But when you go into a show home, sometimes it feels a bit schizophrenic because each room is a representative of that designer's work. And each room kind of stands alone as its own embodiment of that designer's vision, and it's phenomenal. But this house is really, it's incredible. The best part of this whole project, I say, has been getting to know all the designers and feeling like we're part of a group and a community and making friends. I've just loved that. I love that now I've got this big group of designer friends that I can talk to and rely on and kind of exchange ideas with. That's been the best part of all. So
it's funny you mentioned that. I had a very similar experience. We were invited to participate in one of the homes at Modernism Week earlier this year, and we did at the Mesa Modern home. And I am still really catching up. I mean, Urban Bonfire, I started on the cooking side of things, learning about. I mean, when we started, we were a 400 square foot specialty grill and smoker shop. That's how we started. And I always came in it from, my partner Stefan came in it from the architecture, engineering, design side. So I've kind of been playing catch up. When somebody talks to me during a podcast about a Spanish inspired 1785 with this, I have absolutely no idea. So we were invited to be supply a kitchen at Modernism Week, and I went to visit the house. And when you look at each element, to your point, that a designer, whether it's a lighting specialist or an indoor cabinet specialist or flooring, each one of them in isolation, it's very hard for me from a layperson's perspective. It's difficult to see how that's all going to come together.
Right.
When you see it all come together in context, it's an amazing thing how each element that used to look like a focal point blends into a harmonious experience.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's very much the case as it relates to when you're planting, that a tree, a flower in isolation could look too bold or too understated, but when brought together, they weave.
Yeah, it is amazing. And that was the evolution of the house. Like literally, I think within a few days before the final day, I've talked to so many people about this who were working in the house saying, oh my God, there is no way this is going to come together. There's no way this is going to look good. And then all of a sudden, like that, it just transformed. The designers came in, they added all the finishing touches, and it is just the most gorgeous space you can imagine. And with the garden, it was the same thing. It's funny because the master bathroom overlooks a good portion of the garden. And the designer who worked in that space kept saying to me, he's told me several times, he's like, I kept looking out the window and I was like, oh my God, what a wreck this is. Like, how is this ever going to come together? Because he saw the stone workers and the masonry and the dust and everything. And it just looked like chaos. And then he said, all of a sudden I turned around and I looked through the window and it was just like perfection. And I said, yeah, it's not done until it's done. And then everything sort of comes together, but that's just the process, I think. If you don't know what the vision is, you can't possibly imagine what it's going to look like. But as long as we have that map and that plan and everything gets put where it's supposed to be, it does come together. And this one worked out really nicely. I'm really proud of it. And I think it's been well received, and it's just been so much fun.
It looks like an amazing project, and something that at risk of sort of sounding maybe, I think these types of projects where you see local designers collaborate and come together and bring a vision to life, I think it's really important right now that people in local environments see that even during this kind of time of COVID and this uncertainty, as you mentioned earlier, whether it's climate, political, and other, it feels really good, even as like a small win or that there is still a lot of good, and there's still a lot of collaboration, and we're more unified than we actually are divided in our sort of in our lives,
Yeah.
and that often gets missed.
Yes.
And it's really nice to see that you and your colleagues have put this forward during this time. I imagine it's been very fulfilling.
Thanks. It has been on all of those levels and more. It's definitely has been felt like a small way community, and especially the folks coming from Texas, so many local designers out of Dallas and some neighboring cities like Houston and Austin who came in to do this project. It's just been a great way to sort of elevate this local area and all these designers who are so incredibly talented, and just seeing them all work together was just an amazing, amazing thing.
Well, I congratulate you on it and wish you continued success with it, and your firm. I will continue to follow you and your work with rigor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. I learned a lot in my research before today, and I have a deep respect for the work that you do and the level of passion and care that goes into it. It's really quite amazing.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
As did I. Hope to do it again, and I hope once travel resumes, Dallas is absolutely in my top 5 on my list. So hopefully we get to meet each other face to face soon.
Great. I'd love that. Thank you.
As would I. Be well. Right. Have a great weekend. Thank you for today.
You too. Thank you.
This is Ryan Bloom. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Fireside Chat with awesome Dallas, Texas-based landscape architect Melissa Gerstle. I loved hearing about her approach to design in getting the true essence of what her clients' wants and needs are for their outdoor space, and how she uses her vast experience in plants, flowers, trees, shrubs, and all types of vegetation to accomplish the wants, needs, and goals of her clients. It was really nice to hear about what's going on today in Dallas as it relates to COVID. But even through this difficult time, how she and almost 24 other designers have come together to bring the Kips-based show house to life. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Please follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course on Instagram at Urban Bonfire. If you have a question, a comment, or want to get involved in our discussion on design and the future of outdoor space activation, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks very much for joining.